The city lights flickered below, like a sea of fallen stars, but Ella barely noticed them as she stood on the balcony of her apartment. The cold wind brushed against her skin, sending shivers down her spine. She held the torn pieces of a letter in her trembling hands, watching them scatter into the night. Each fragment carried a broken promise, a shattered dream, and a memory she wished she could forget. The world she had once envisioned seemed so far away now, just a mirage fading into the distance. Liam had promised her everything, a life of love, security, and adventure, but those promises had dissolved like smoke in the air. She wiped the tears from her cheeks and closed her eyes, her mind drifting back to the moment they first met. It was a rainy evening, and she had been working the late shift at a small cafe downtown. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air as the rain tapped gently against the glass windows. He had walked in, his tailored suit dripping from the storm outside, and their eyes had met. His warm smile had melted her initial shyness, and before she knew it, he was sitting across from her, sharing stories of his ambitious dreams and the life he wanted to build. He had been magnetic, the kind of man who made you believe in fairy tales. Their relationship had blossomed quickly, each moment more enchanting than the last. Liam whisked her away to expensive dinners, spontaneous weekend getaways, and moonlit strolls along the beach. He painted vivid pictures of their future: a house by the sea, vacations across the world, and a family they would build together. For the first time, Ella felt like she belonged to something extraordinary. She had come from a modest background, where dreams were often sacrificed for survival, but Liam made her believe that anything was possible. She trusted him completely, but even in the most beautiful love stories, cracks could form. She had brushed off the little things at first: his late nights, his vague explanations, the moments when he would pull away just as she got closer. Love made her blind to the warnings that whispered in her ear. Maya, her best friend, had been the only voice of reason. "Ella, just be careful," she had warned gently. "Sometimes people promise you the world because they know that's what you want to hear." Ella had laughed it off then, confident that her love story was different. Liam wasn't like other men, she had told herself. He was her anchor, the one who had rescued her from a life of mediocrity. But deep down, a small part of her had started to worry. She had noticed the changes, the way he would turn his phone screen away when she was near, the unexplained business trips that always seemed to pop up at the worst times. She told herself it was all in her head. Every couple had ups and downs, didn't they? Then came their first anniversary. She'd spent hours getting ready, wearing the red dress he had bought her on their first trip to Paris. The table was set with candles, soft music playing in the background. She checked her phone, expecting a message any moment, but the screen remained silent. Minutes turned into hours, and as midnight approached, she realized he wasn't coming. A simple text arrived. "Sorry, work emergency. I'll make it up to you." Her heart sank, but she still forgave him. She had to. The following morning, she smiled through the disappointment and convinced herself that things would get better. Liam was a busy man, and she knew that love required patience. But as time passed, the cracks in their relationship widened. One evening, as she cleaned his apartment, she discovered a small velvet box hidden in the back of his closet. Her heart raced as she opened it, expecting to see a ring. Instead, a delicate gold bracelet glimmered inside, engraved with the initials VL. Confused, she assumed it was an early gift for her upcoming birthday. After all, who else could it be for? The doubt lingered, but she buried it, determined not to let paranoia ruin her happiness. But fate had its way of revealing the truth when you least expected it. One night, as Liam showered, his phone vibrated on the bedside table. She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the screen. Curiosity won the battle, and she unlocked the phone. Her breath hitched as she read the message. "Thank you for the weekend, Liam. Can't wait to see you again. Love, Vanessa." The walls around her seemed to close in, the air growing heavy. Her mind raced, piecing together the clues she had ignored for so long. The late nights, the missed anniversaries, the mysterious bracelet. It all made sense now. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat a painful reminder of how blind she had been. But instead of breaking down, something inside her hardened. This wasn't the end of her story. She wouldn't be another woman discarded after serving her purpose. If Liam had built their relationship on lies, then she would make sure those lies came crashing down. Her hands shook as she put his phone back on the table and sat down on the bed. Tears blurred her vision, but her resolve grew stronger. This wasn't the time for tears. This was the time for answers. She wiped her eyes, took a deep breath, and made a silent promise to herself. She would uncover everything Liam had hidden from her. And when she did, she wouldn't just walk away quietly. The next morning, the sunlight poured through the blinds, casting soft beams across the room, but Ella felt none of its warmth. She sat on the edge of the bed, her fingers tracing invisible lines over the fabric of her dress from the night before. It still smelled faintly of the perfume Liam had once said he loved on her. Now, the scent was suffocating. Her mind was clouded with questions. Who was Vanessa? How long had this been going on? Did any of their relationship mean anything to him? Determined to find the truth, she took a shower, washing away the tears and doubts that had clung to her all night. Today was not about emotions. It was about uncovering the lies. By the time she stepped out of the bathroom, she had a plan. She would piece everything together, step by step. If Liam thought she was oblivious, he was about to learn otherwise. She started small, going through the drawers and closets in the apartment. At first, it was the little things. Receipts from fancy dinners on dates she didn't recognise, airline tickets booked to destinations they had never visited together. She laid them out on the dining table like pieces of a puzzle. Each discovery stung like a fresh wound, but she swallowed the pain. The real revelation came when she found a folder tucked beneath a stack of business documents in his study. Inside were photos, pictures of a house by the sea, exactly like the one he had promised her. But the name on the contract wasn't hers. It was Vanessa's. Her breath hitched as she flipped through the papers. The floor seemed to shift beneath her feet, but she forced herself to stay upright. The man who had painted a future so beautiful, it felt like a dream had been building that dream with someone else all along. A wave of nausea rolled through her, and she gripped the edge of the table for support. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Liam. "Won't be home for dinner. Work meeting ran late." The lies continued, seamlessly woven into his daily life, as if deceiving her had become second nature. But she wasn't the same woman who had waited by the table with candles burning down to wax. Her heart was fractured, yes, but it wasn't weak. She had no intention of waiting anymore. She called Maya, her voice trembling but firm. "I need your help," she said, not giving her friend a chance to ask questions. "Meet me at the cafe. I'll explain everything." When she arrived, Maya was already seated, a worried expression etched across her face. Without preamble, Ella laid out the photos, the receipts, and the documents, each one a piece of Liam's betrayal. Maya listened intently, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. When Ella finished, there was silence between them, broken only by the hum of the espresso machine behind the counter. "You have everything you need to confront him," Maya said finally, her voice steady. "But are you sure you're ready for what comes after?" Ella met her friend's gaze, the weight of the question settling over her like a heavy blanket. Was she ready to face the man who had built her dreams just to destroy them? Did she have the strength to walk away from the life she thought was hers? "I don't know," Ella admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't keep living in this lie." Maya reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Then, let's make sure when you confront him, he doesn't get the chance to twist the truth." With Maya by her side, Ella began to strategize. They combed through the evidence, making sure everything was in order. But even as they plotted, a part of Ella couldn't help but wonder, what if Liam had an explanation she hadn't considered? What if there was more to the story than she had uncovered? That small, fragile hope was the only thing keeping her heart from completely turning to stone. By the time they parted ways, the sun had begun to set, casting a golden glow over the city. Ella walked home, her footsteps slow but deliberate. She was tired of second-guessing herself, tired of being the woman who waited for answers that would never come. Tonight, she would confront Liam, and no matter what he said, she would finally learn the truth. The apartment was eerily quiet when Ella arrived home. The dim light from a nearby lamp cast long shadows on the walls, creating a sense of unease that settled deep in her chest. She placed her bag on the counter and stood there for a moment, listening to the silence. Liam wasn't home yet. That gave her time to steady her nerves and rehearse what she needed to say. But the words felt tangled in her throat, as if her emotions were choking them before they could form. She took a deep breath and sat on the couch, her mind replaying every memory of their time together like a cruel highlight reel. The sound of keys jingling at the door jolted her out of her thoughts. She quickly stood, smoothing her dress as if presenting herself perfectly would somehow mask the turmoil within. The door creaked open, and there he was, Liam, with that familiar, charming smile, as if he hadn't just spent the evening lying to her. He stepped inside, setting down his briefcase and loosening his tie. "Hey," he said casually, as if this were just another ordinary night. "I didn't expect you to still be up." Ella forced a smile, though her heart was racing. "I thought we could talk." Liam raised an eyebrow, slightly taken aback by her serious tone, but he nodded and made his way to the couch. He sat down, stretching his arms over the backrest, like he owned not just the furniture, but the entire atmosphere. "Sure. What's on your mind?" For a moment, Ella couldn't speak. Her eyes traced his features, the face she had loved so fiercely, now tainted by betrayal. The man sitting before her wasn't the Liam she had built her dreams around. He was someone else, someone she no longer recognized, but she couldn't afford to be weak now. "I found something today," she said, her voice steady but cold. "Actually, I found a lot of things." His smile faded, replaced by a look of confusion. "What are you talking about?" She reached into her bag and pulled out the stack of photos and documents, dropping them onto the coffee table between them. The papers fanned out like cards in a deadly hand, each one a silent accusation. Liam's eyes flicked over them, and for the first time, she saw a crack in his composure. He leaned forward, quickly gathering the photos into a pile, as if hiding them would erase what she had seen. "Ella," he started, his voice softer now, more careful. "Let me explain." "Go ahead," she said, crossing her arms. "Explain how you bought a house with another woman. Explain the weekend trips, the bracelet with her initials, and the messages on your phone. Tell me how this was all just a misunderstanding." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. She saw the gears turning in his head, his mind scrambling for an excuse that could salvage the situation. But the silence was damning. She had given him too much time to prepare for lies before, and now she wasn't going to give him that luxury. "Were you ever planning to tell me?" Her voice cracked, but she quickly swallowed the lump in her throat. "Or were you going to let me believe in this fantasy until it all fell apart?" Liam ran a hand through his hair, frustration flickering across his face. "It's not what you think," he finally said. "Vanessa, she's from my past. I didn't know how to tell you because—" "Stop," Ella interrupted, her tone sharp. "Don't insult me with half-truths. I know everything. The trips, the house. It wasn't just a mistake. You built a life with her while making me believe I was your future." Liam's shoulders slumped, the weight of her words pressing down on him. For a brief moment, she saw something that resembled guilt in his eyes. But it wasn't enough. Guilt wouldn't erase the pain. Guilt wouldn't give her back the years she had invested in him, believing they were building something real. "I loved you, Liam," she whispered, her voice raw with emotion. "I would have done anything for you, but you were just passing time." "That's not true," he said quickly, leaning toward her as if he could close the distance that had grown between them. "I did love you. I still do." She shook her head, tears threatening to spill over. "Love doesn't look like this. Love doesn't leave someone broken." For a moment, the room was silent again, except for the sound of her breathing and the clock ticking in the background. Liam sat back, his hands running down his face as if he too was trying to figure out how everything had come to this. But for Ella, the answers didn't matter anymore. She had uncovered the truth, and no amount of words could undo the betrayal that had carved itself into her heart. "I'm done," she said quietly, standing up. "I'm done believing in your promises." Liam stood too, desperation flashing in his eyes. "Ella, please, don't walk away. We can fix this." She paused at the door, her hand resting on the frame. For a brief moment, she thought about turning around, about giving him one last chance. But then she remembered the sleepless nights, the waiting, the empty words that had led her here. She had given him enough chances. Without looking back, she opened the door and stepped into the night, leaving behind the man who had promised her the world, but given her nothing but heartbreak. As the door closed behind her, she felt the weight on her chest begin to lift. For the first time in a long time, she breathed freely. But this wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of something new. Ella walked down the dimly lit street, her heels clicking softly against the pavement, echoing in the quiet night. The cold breeze stung her face, but she welcomed it. It numbed the pain for a moment, just enough to keep her from falling apart. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to get away from the suffocating lies that had wrapped themselves around her life like a tightening noose. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she ignored it at first. She knew it was Liam. The vibration stopped, then started again. Persistent like the man who had always found a way to explain things just enough to make her stay. This time, though, she wouldn't be swayed. Pulling the phone out, she stared at the screen. His name flashed across it, a cruel reminder of everything she had lost. Her thumb hovered over the answer button for a second before she pressed decline. Silence returned, and she let out a shaky breath, her fingers gripping the phone tightly. The glow of a nearby cafe caught her eye, and she found herself walking toward it without thinking. The warmth inside was a welcome relief from the chill outside. She ordered a cup of tea and found a small table near the window. As she sat down, the reality of what she had done finally hit her. She had walked away. For good. The thought was both terrifying and liberating. Her phone vibrated again, but this time it wasn't Liam. It was Maya. Ella quickly answered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hey, are you okay?" Maya's concern was immediate, her tone gentle but firm. "I don't know," Ella admitted, stirring her tea absent-mindedly. "I did it. I left him." There was a pause, then a sigh of relief on the other end. "Good. You deserve better than what he gave you." Ella's lips curved into a small bittersweet smile. It doesn't feel good right now. It feels empty. That's because you put your heart into someone who didn't deserve it, Maya replied. But trust me, this feeling won't last forever. You're stronger than you think. Ella leaned back in her chair, letting Maya's words sink in. She knew her friend was right, but it didn't stop the ache in her chest. I thought he was my forever, she whispered. How did I get it so wrong? You didn't get it wrong. He did, Maya said firmly. Liam lied, and that's on him. But what you do next, that's on you. Don't let him be the end of your story. Ella nodded, even though Maya couldn't see her. I need to find something else to hold on to. I can't keep living in this mess. And you will, Maya assured her. But first, let yourself feel everything. The pain, the anger, the betrayal. Let it all out. Don't bottle it up or it'll eat you alive. Ella cerró los ojos, una lágrima deslizándose por su mejilla. I don't know how to start over. You don't have to know everything right now, Maya said softly. Just take it one day at a time. You walked away tonight, and that's the hardest step. Everything else will come. They talked for a while longer, Maya's voice a soothing presence that kept Ella from spiraling. By the time she hung up, her tea had gone cold, but she didn't care. She stared out the window, watching as cars passed by, their headlights casting fleeting shadows on the walls. As she sat there, she realized that leaving Liam wasn't just about escaping the betrayal. It was about reclaiming her life, her dreams, her independence, her sense of self. For too long, she had let his promises define her happiness. Now, she had the chance to define it for herself. And while the path ahead seemed uncertain, she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going back. Ella picked up her phone and blocked Liam's number. The simple action felt like a small victory, a step toward the closure she so desperately needed. She paid for her tea, grabbed her coat, and walked out of the cafe, the cool night air hitting her face once more. But this time, it didn't feel as cold. The weight on her chest had lifted slightly, and she breathed in deeply, letting the fresh air fill her lungs. She didn't know exactly where life would take her next, but she was ready to find out. The morning sun peeked through the cracks in Ella's curtains, casting soft beams of light across the room. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind clouded but calm for the first time in what felt like ages. The events of the previous night played on a loop, but instead of regret, there was a strange sense of relief. She had taken control. She had walked away before the lies could consume her completely. That thought alone gave her the strength to get up. She slipped into a comfortable sweater and made her way to the kitchen, the sound of the kettle boiling breaking the otherwise still silence of her apartment. She'd always loved mornings, but during her time with Liam, they had lost their magic. Now, as she sipped her tea and stared out the window, she wondered how many simple pleasures she had sacrificed in the name of love. Love that, she realized now, was built on false promises. Her phone buzzed on the counter, and for a second her heart jumped, thinking it could be Liam. But when she saw Maya's name instead, a wave of comfort washed over her. She answered, her voice still groggy. "Good morning." "Morning," Maya replied cheerfully. "How are you feeling?" Ella took a moment to think. "Better than I expected," she admitted. "Still a little lost, but better." "That's progress," Maya said encouragingly. "Are you up for some company today? I was thinking maybe we could go out, get some fresh air and do something fun. You could use a distraction." Ella sonrió suavemente. "Yeah, I'd like that." An hour later, they met at the park, where the trees were shedding their autumn leaves in bursts of red, gold and brown. The air was crisp, and the sound of children playing in the distance created a sense of normalcy that Ella hadn't felt in a while. She and Maya walked along the winding paths, sipping coffee and talking about anything that wasn't related to Liam. For once, it wasn't about betrayal or heartbreak. It was just two friends enjoying the day. But as much as she tried to push the thoughts away, Liam's face kept creeping into her mind. The way he had looked at her during the confrontation, the desperate plea in his voice. Did he really feel remorse? Or was it just another act? She hated that she still cared. That, despite everything, a part of her wanted to believe he had loved her once. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Maya asked, nudging her gently. Ella suspirò. "I hate that he still has this hold on me. I know I made the right decision, but part of me keeps wondering if I missed something. If maybe he wasn't as bad as I think." Maya stopped walking and turned to face her. "Ella, listen to me. He cheated. He lied. He manipulated you. Don't romanticize the good moments just because the bad ones hurt. You loved the version of him you thought was real, not the man he turned out to be." Ella bit her lip, holding back tears. "But what if I was too harsh? What if he really did love me and just made a mistake?" Maya shook her head firmly. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or having an argument. What Liam did was a pattern of deception. He didn't make a mistake, Ella. He made choices, and you chose to walk away, which was brave." The words hit her like a wave, sinking into the deepest parts of her heart. Maya was right. Liam hadn't just slipped up once or twice. He had built an entire life on lies, and she had been collateral damage. There was no version of their story that ended with her staying and being happy. Walking away was her salvation, even if it didn't feel like it right now. They sat on a bench, and Ella leaned her head against Maya's shoulder, grateful for her friend's unwavering support. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't think I could do this without you." "You don't have to," Maya replied with a smile. "But eventually, you'll realize you can." After a few moments of quiet, Maya pulled out her phone. "So, what's next for you?" she asked. "Have you thought about what you want to do now that you're free of him?" Ella rio suavemente. "Free? That's a strange word to hear, but it feels good." "Well, you're free. No more waiting around for texts, no more wondering if he'll show up or let you down again. You can do anything you want." The thought was overwhelming, but exciting. For years, her life had revolved around Liam's plans, his dreams, his version of their future. Now, she had the chance to create her own. She thought about the passion project she had put on hold, the small travel blog she had once loved working on, before Liam convinced her it was a waste of time. Maybe it was time to revisit it, to pick up the pieces of her old self and rebuild them into something stronger. "I think I want to travel," Ella said suddenly, the realization lighting a spark in her chest. "I want to see the places I've always dreamed of, not because someone else promised to take me there, but because I want to go." Maya grinned. "That's the Ella I know." As they stood up to continue their walk, Ella felt lighter, as if the weight of the past was finally beginning to lift. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't waiting for someone else to make her happy. She was going to find her own H that evening. As Ella returned to her apartment, the sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and gold, casting a warm glow over the city. The view reminded her of the many times she'd watched the sunset with Liam, their hands intertwined as they spoke of dreams and possibilities. But tonight, the colours didn't feel like bittersweet memories. They felt like the promise of a new beginning. She dropped her keys on the counter and opened her laptop, a sense of determination guiding her fingers as she typed into the search bar. Flights to Santorini. It had been the place she had always dreamed of visiting, the one destination she and Liam had talked about endlessly, but never made time for. She scrolled through the options, her heart racing slightly as she imagined herself there, standing on the cliffs overlooking the sea, the wind tangling her hair. This time, the thought wasn't tied to Liam or his broken promises. It was her dream, and she was reclaiming it. The sound of a knock on the door shattered her moment of peace. Her breath hitched, and for a split second, she wondered if it could be him. She wasn't ready for that. Not yet. But as she cautiously approached the door and looked through the peephole, relief washed over her. It was Maya, holding a bag of takeout and wearing a mischievous grin. "I come bearing comfort food," Maya said as Ella opened the door. "Figured you could use some company tonight." Ella rió suavemente y se apartó para dejarla entrar. "You have perfect timing." They set the food on the coffee table and settled onto the couch, the smell of fried dumplings and noodles filling the room. The comforting aroma brought a sense of normalcy that Ella hadn't realized she needed. As they ate, Maya glanced at the open laptop and raised an eyebrow. "Planning a trip?" she asked, popping a dumpling into her mouth. Ella nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I'm thinking of going to Santorini. It's something I've always wanted to do, and I figured there's no better time than now." Maya's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Yes, this is exactly what you need. When are you thinking of going?" Ella se encogió de hombros, la idea aún formándose en su mente. "Soon. I don't want to overthink it. I just want to book the ticket and go." "I love this new version of you," Maya said, leaning back against the cushions. "Spontaneous, adventurous, and free." The word free echoed in Ella's mind, and for the first time, she didn't feel scared by it. She'd spent so long clinging to the idea of a future with Liam that the thought of standing on her own had once seemed impossible. But now, as she sat here with her best friend, dreaming about a trip she would take on her own terms, she realized that freedom wasn't something to fear. It was a gift she had given herself. They spent the next hour talking about travel plans, laughing as they imagined Ella navigating the narrow streets of Greece and getting lost in the beauty of the island. The conversation shifted from destinations to future dreams, and for once, Liam's name didn't come up. He was becoming a distant memory, a part of her past that no longer had the power to control her. As the night wore on, Maya finally stretched and stood. "I should let you get some rest. You've got an exciting adventure to plan." Ella walked her to the door and hugged her tightly. "Thank you for everything." "That's what best friends are for," Maya replied with a wink before disappearing into the night. Ella cerró la puerta y se apoyó en ella, su corazón lleno pero ligero. She returned to the couch, her laptop still open, and hovered over the Book Now button on the flight page. Her finger hesitated for only a second before she clicked it. The confirmation screen appeared, and a rush of exhilaration coursed through her veins. She had done it. She had taken the first step toward building a life that was entirely her own. Later that night, as she lay in bed, her phone buzzed once again. This time, it wasn't Maya. It was an unknown number, but the message made her breath catch in her throat. "Ella, it's me. I know you've blocked my number, but I need to talk to you. Please, just one last time." Her fingers tightened around the phone, her heart racing. She stared at the message, debating whether she should respond or delete it. Part of her longed for closure, for answers to the questions that still haunted her. But another part of her knew that talking to Liam again could pull her back into the very spiral she was trying to escape. For several moments, she lay there in the dark, torn between the past and the future. Then, with a deep breath, she made her decision. She deleted the message and set the phone down on the nightstand, turning her back to it as she closed her eyes. Whatever Liam had to say, it no longer mattered. She wasn't waiting for his explanations anymore. The only voice she needed to listen to was her own. The morning light filtered gently through the curtains, casting soft shadows across Ella's bedroom. She opened her eyes slowly, a sense of calm settling over her as she remembered the decision she had made the night before. For once, She hadn't woken up to the heavy ache of regret or doubt. There was no lingering need to check her phone for messages or missed calls. She had silenced that chapter of her life. Today felt like the start of something new, something she could shape without interference. She stretched her arms above her head and sat up, feeling the warmth of the morning sun on her face. As she brewed her coffee, the smell filled the small apartment, a comforting reminder of mornings long before Liam had entered her life. Back then, her dreams had been simple: explore the world, write about her experiences, and find joy in the little things. Somewhere along the way, she had let those dreams be replaced by his. Not anymore. With her laptop open, she scrolled through her email, stopping when she saw the flight confirmation. Her heart fluttered, not from anxiety but from anticipation. She smiled to herself as she imagined standing on the whitewashed balconies of Santorini, the Mediterranean breeze brushing against her skin, the turquoise waters stretching endlessly before her. There would be no expectations, no timelines dictated by someone else. She would wake up every morning and decide for herself what the day would hold. A soft knock at the door pulled her attention away. When she opened it, she found the delivery man holding a small package addressed to her. She hadn't ordered anything recently, and for a moment she wondered if it was from Liam. Her pulse quickened and her hands hesitated before finally accepting the box. Closing the door behind her, she placed the package on the kitchen counter and carefully peeled back the tape. Inside was a small, elegantly wrapped gift box with no note attached. She lifted the lid and found a delicate silver bracelet, its charm shaped like a compass. The sight of it made her stomach twist. Memories flooded her: the bracelet Liam had bought for Vanessa, the betrayal she had uncovered, the tears she had shed in the aftermath. Her fingers trembled as she held the bracelet, wondering if this was some last-ditch effort from Liam to manipulate her. She searched the box for any clue, any letter, but there was nothing. Just the bracelet glimmering innocently under the morning light. Was it a coincidence, or was he trying to send a message? Her mind raced, but then she remembered the promise she'd made to herself. She wouldn't let him pull her back into his web of lies. She grabbed her phone and quickly dialed Maya. "Hey," Maya answered, her voice cheerful. "What's up?" "I got a package," Ella said, pacing the kitchen. "It's a bracelet, a compass charm. There's no note, but I'm pretty sure it's from Liam." There was a brief pause before Maya responded, her tone more serious now. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," Ella admitted. "Part of me feels like this is his way of trying to drag me back. He knows exactly how to get inside my head." "Don't let him," Maya said firmly. "He's fishing for a reaction, hoping you'll reach out and give him one. But you don't owe him that." Ella exhaló lentamente, agarrando el borde del mostrador. "I thought I was past this, but seeing the bracelet brought everything back." "That's normal," Maya reassured her. "Healing isn't a straight line. There are going to be moments when it hurts again, but that doesn't mean you've gone backward. It just means you're human." Ella cerró los ojos, dejando que las palabras se hundieran. Maya was right. She had come too far to let a piece of jewelry unravel all the progress she had made. She opened the window, the morning breeze cooling her flushed cheeks, and stared at the bracelet one last time before making her decision. "I'm getting rid of it," she said, her voice steady. "I'm not keeping anything that ties me to him." "That's the Ella I know," Maya said proudly. "Want me to come over and help you burn it?" Ella rió suavemente. "No, I think I can handle this one on my own." After ending the call, she grabbed the bracelet, walked out of her apartment, and headed toward the park at the end of her street. The early morning air was refreshing, and for the first time in a while, she felt in control of her emotions. As she reached the small bridge that overlooked a stream, she held the bracelet tightly in her hand. "I don't need you anymore," she whispered, her words carried away by the soft rustle of leaves. With one final breath, she let the bracelet fall, watching as it sank into the water and disappeared beneath the surface. The weight in her chest eased, replaced by a sense of freedom she hadn't expected. She turned away from the bridge and walked back toward her apartment, the sound of the rushing stream fading behind her. By the time she returned home, she felt lighter, as though she had shed the last piece of Liam's hold over her. She opened her laptop and began jotting down a travel itinerary, her excitement growing with each destination she added. Santorini would be the first of many places she would visit. Her heart no longer yearned for answers or closure from Liam. She had given herself the only closure she needed. This was her life now, and she was ready to live it fully. The days leading up to her flight passed quickly, but instead of feeling overwhelmed, Ella felt alive. She had thrown herself into preparations, not just for the trip, but for rediscovering who she was, without Liam's shadow looming over her. She spent her evenings curating a list of places to visit, foods to try, and local stories to explore. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't planning her life around someone else's schedule or expectations. Every detail was hers, crafted with the care and excitement she had once buried beneath Liam's promises. On the morning of her departure, the soft hum of her suitcase wheels on the floor was the only sound in her apartment. She glanced around, her gaze lingering on the spaces that had once reminded her of him. The balcony where they'd shared countless late-night talks, the couch where they'd laughed over silly TV shows, the table where she had waited for him on their anniversary. Candles burned down to nothing. But today, those memories felt distant, like echoes from a life that no longer belonged to her. As she zipped up her suitcase and placed it by the door, a knock startled her. For a moment, her heart skipped, wondering if it was Liam making one final attempt to see her before she left. But when she opened the door, it was only Maya, grinning and holding 2 coffee cups. "Thought you could use a little caffeine boost before the big adventure," Maya said, handing her a cup. "Ella Rio aceptando café. You always know exactly what I need." They sat on the couch, the morning sunlight streaming through the windows, casting golden patterns on the floor. There was no rush, no tension, just the calmness of 2 friends sharing a moment before life took Ella in a new direction. "You ready for this?" Maya asked, sipping her coffee. "I think so," Ella replied, her voice soft but sure. "I'm nervous, but it's a good kind of nervous." "Good. That's how you know you're doing something right." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the journey ahead settling over them. Maya reached over and squeezed Ella's hand. "I'm proud of you. I know how hard this has been, but you've handled it with more strength than you realise." Ella felt her throat tighten with emotion, but she smiled through it. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have," Maya said firmly. "I just reminded you of who you already are." After a few more minutes of conversation, Maya helped her carry her luggage down to the car. As they loaded it into the trunk, Ella took a deep breath, the cool morning air filling her lungs. This was it, the moment she had been working toward. No Liam, no betrayal, no lingering what-ifs, just her dreams, and the open road ahead. The drive to the airport was filled with light conversation and bursts of laughter. Maya insisted on telling ridiculous travel tips, like how to make friends by offering snacks on the plane, or how to ward off unwanted conversations by pretending to read a book upside down. Ella couldn't stop laughing, the sound filling the car like a breath of fresh air. When they finally arrived at the airport, Maya pulled her into a tight hug. "You're going to be amazing, Ella. Don't be afraid to let go of everything holding you back. This is your time." Ella nodded, blinking back tears. "I'll send you pictures from every place I visit." "You'd better," Maya said with a playful wink. "And don't forget to live in the moment." As Ella made her way through security and toward the gate, A mixture of emotions swirled inside her. Excitement, fear, hope. She had spent so long tied to a life that wasn't truly hers, and now she was stepping into the unknown. But instead of fear weighing her down, it lifted her. She was finally free to create a story that was her own. When she boarded the plane and found her seat by the window, she gazed out at the tarmac as the engines roared to life. The world outside blurred slightly as the plane began to taxi, but Ella's vision was clear. She had let go of the past, shed the weight of unfulfilled promises, and chosen herself. As the plane ascended, the city below became a patchwork of roads, buildings, and memories, growing smaller and smaller until it was nothing more than a distant image fading into the clouds. She leaned back, closed her eyes, and smiled. For the first time in years, Ella wasn't chasing someone else's promises. She was chasing her own. And this time, she knew exactly where she was headed. The salty breeze brushed against Ella's face as she stood on the balcony of her small rental in Santorini, the sun dipping below the horizon and setting the sky ablaze in shades of orange and pink. The gentle hum of waves crashing against the cliffs below was the only sound, a soothing backdrop to her thoughts. She wrapped her arms around herself, breathing in the scent of the sea and the faint aroma of blooming bougainvillea. This was the moment she had dreamed of, a moment of peace, clarity, and freedom. But standing here now, it felt even more profound. Her phone sat on the table beside her, buzzing with notifications from social media, but she ignored them. Instead, she focused on the view, the warm glow of the sunset washing over her like a promise that things were finally changing. The world felt bigger, her future wide open, no longer confined to the limitations of someone else's expectations. That evening, she wandered down to a small cafe near the harbour, the cobblestone streets glowing under the soft light of lanterns. The gentle murmur of conversation surrounded her, as locals and tourists alike gathered to enjoy the evening. She ordered a plate of grilled seafood and a glass of wine, savouring the taste of freedom with every bite. For once, she wasn't thinking about what someone else wanted, or whether she was doing enough to be loved. She was simply living, and that was enough. As she sipped her wine, a man sitting at a nearby table caught her attention. He had a kind face, warm eyes, and a notebook open in front of him. He wasn't the type of man who would turn heads with a flashy presence, but there was something genuine about him, something that felt easy, unforced. She quickly looked away, a small smile playing on her lips as she reminded herself that she wasn't here for romance. This trip was about rediscovering herself and nothing more. After dinner, she strolled along the waterfront, the sound of the waves lapping against the dock soothing her restless mind. She'd expected loneliness to creep in during her first night here, but instead there was only a quiet contentment. The weight of Liam's betrayal wasn't gone entirely, but it no longer felt like a burden she couldn't carry. It was becoming a distant memory, a lesson she had learned rather than a wound she was still nursing. When she returned to her rental, the cool breeze followed her inside, ruffling the curtains as she opened the balcony doors. She sat down at the small writing desk and opened her laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard. For years, she had put off writing, first because of the demands of life, and later because Liam had subtly dismissed her passion, convincing her that it was a hobby, not a career. But now, the words came easily, flowing from a place deep within her that had been waiting patiently for its moment. She began typing. The thing about promises is that they're easy to make and even easier to break. But when you learn to make promises to yourself, everything changes. Her fingers danced across the keys, her thoughts pouring onto the screen like a flood finally unleashed. She wrote about the whirlwind romance, the heartbreak, and the courage it took to leave. She wrote about standing on the edge of uncertainty and choosing to leap, even when she didn't know where she would land. And as she wrote, she realized that her story wasn't just about betrayal. It was about resilience, growth, and rediscovery. Hours passed without her noticing, and when she finally stopped, her laptop screen was filled with words that reflected the woman she was becoming. She leaned back in her chair, a satisfied sigh escaping her lips. For the first time, she wasn't afraid to confront her past. Instead, she embraced it as a chapter that had led her here. Her phone buzzed again, and this time she checked the notification. It was a message from Maya, accompanied by a photo of the two of them from a few months ago, laughing together at a beachside cafe. The caption read, "Look how far you've come." Ella sonrió, su pecho calentándose con gratitud. She typed a quick reply, "Thanks for reminding me. I needed this." As the night deepened and the island quieted down, she crawled into bed, the sound of waves still whispering outside. She knew there would still be days when the memories of Liam would sting, when doubts would creep in like shadows. But she also knew that she had the strength to keep moving forward. She had built that strength on her own. With her eyes closed and her heart lighter than it had been in years, she allowed herself to dream. This time, not about what someone else could give her, but about the life she was creating with every decision she made. The days passed in a blissful blur, each one filled with discovery, reflection, and small victories that reminded Ella of her independence. She spent her mornings exploring hidden alleys lined with whitewashed buildings and vibrant blue doors, her afternoons basking on the beach with the warm sun on her skin, and her evenings watching sunsets that seemed to paint the sky just for her. With every step, she left behind more of the pain that had once felt insurmountable. One evening, she sat at a small seaside restaurant, her notebook open beside her half-empty glass of wine. The salty breeze kissed her skin, and the scent of grilled fish and roasted vegetables filled the air. She tapped her pen against the page, staring out at the horizon, where the last sliver of sun was sinking into the sea. Her mind wandered to the story she'd been writing, her story. Every word she wrote felt like a weight lifted, as if putting her experiences down on paper was slowly setting her free. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she didn't notice someone approaching until the shadow fell across her table. Looking up, she saw the man from the cafe, warm eyes, notebook in hand, and a gentle smile that didn't feel intrusive. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, gesturing toward the empty seat across from her. "But I couldn't help noticing you're a writer too." Ella blinked, momentarily taken off guard. I'm not sure I'd call myself a writer," she replied with a shy smile. "Just someone putting her thoughts down." He smiled warmly and sat down when she gestured for him to join her. "Well, I'd say that's exactly what makes a writer." His name was Daniel, and over the course of their conversation, she learned that he was a travel writer who had been exploring Greece for the past few weeks, gathering stories and experiences for a book. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, touching on everything from favourite cities to their love for storytelling. There was something easy about talking to him. No pressure, no expectations, just two people sharing a moment. As the evening stretched on, Ella felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, the joy of connection, without fear of betrayal lurking in the background. With Liam, there had always been a part of her walking on eggshells, afraid to say the wrong thing or ask too many questions. But with Daniel, the conversation was free and genuine. When the restaurant began to close for the night, Daniel walked her back to her rental, the sound of their laughter echoing down the quiet streets. As they reached her door, he hesitated, as if unsure whether to say more or let the night end naturally. "I had a really good time tonight," he said, his voice soft but sincere. Me too, Ella replied, her heart fluttering slightly. It's been a while since I've had a night like this. He smiled, and for a moment, the world around them seemed to pause. But instead of rushing into anything, Daniel simply nodded. I'd love to see you again, but no pressure, just let me know. With that, he left, his footsteps fading into the distance as Ella stood by her door, her emotions swirling. She knew what the old version of herself would have done. She would have thrown herself into the possibility of new love, desperate to replace what she had lost. But this time, she wasn't that person. She didn't need someone to fill a void. If she chose to see Daniel again, it wouldn't be out of desperation. It would be because she wanted to, on her terms. The next morning, she woke up with a sense of clarity. Instead of dwelling on the what-ifs, she focused on the present. She spent the day hiking through the hills of Santorini, the vibrant flowers and sweeping ocean views, reminding her of life's beauty, even after pain. As she reached the top of the hill, she sat on a rocky ledge, the wind brushing through her hair. She thought of Liam briefly, not with anger, but with acceptance. He had been a part of her journey, but he no longer defined it. Her phone buzzed and she pulled it out to see a message from Daniel. No pressure, but if you're up for it, there's a little local festival tonight. Thought you might like it. Ella sonrió, sus dedos suspendidos sobre la tecla. Then, she made her decision. I'd love to. She knew she was still healing. She knew she wasn't ready to fall head over heels again. But she also knew that life wasn't meant to be lived in fear of repeating the past. She would take things slowly, savor the moments, and let the future unfold without the weight of old scars. That night, as she prepared to meet Daniel, she looked at herself in the mirror, seeing a version of herself that she hadn't recognized in a long time. She wasn't the woman who had waited by the phone, hoping for validation. She wasn't the woman who had let herself be defined by someone else's promises. She was Ella, resilient, independent, and ready to embrace whatever life had in store for her.